Want to know how to act realistically on screen? Then don't go away. Yep, did it. Pre-title, intro. Hello everyone and welcome to another video. I'm Alannah Marie and in this video I've compiled 4 simple tips that will help us to act as realistically as possible on screen. In other words, how to act like a natural human being in real life would act. Of course, acting realistically is a bit of a contradiction. Acting is not at all realistic. You're pretending. You can, however, act in a realist way or naturalist way. And who knows how to define realism anyway? Or reality, or realistic acting. Anyway, we all know what we mean by acting realistically. That's what I'm about to talk about. And you might be like, hey, if all we have to do is act like we do in real life, then it's just easy, right? Yeah, but why do so many of us get it wrong? Or why do so many of us still have these questions? How do you act realistically? Well, that's what this video is all about. So, without further ado, let's begin. The first thing I'd like to talk about with you is contrasting layers. People are complex and multidimensional. They think lots of different things all at once, usually. So, to act realistically, we must consider how people in real life are a melange of contrasting, sometimes contradictory layers of thoughts and emotions and beliefs and assumptions. So to act realistically, we must consider how people in real life are a melange of contrasting, often contradictory layers that can be seen in the eyes. So they might act one way on the outside, but in the eyes we can see that maybe they're thinking something else. These contrasting layers could be contrasting thoughts, contrasting emotions, contrasting beliefs, contrasting decisions, not knowing what to do next, assuming something about another character and maybe not thinking that really, but maybe they are, I don't know, prejudices, their own thoughts about themselves. Are they confident? Are they not confident at all? Are they a confident person? Are they someone who pretends to be confident but secretly is hating themselves? You know, there's so much going on in a person. It's not just like, this is a confident person and there's nothing else going on underneath the surface. There's so much going on. So I think in order to act realistically, you have to represent all these complex layers, and in order to do that, we have to incorporate these layers into our acting. Layering is the idea that what you think and what you do can be contrasting or even contradictory things. This is also a useful technique to use if you can't access a particular thought that your character might be having. For instance, maybe your character is breaking the law and you just can't access this mindset because you can't relate to your character's actions. Well, as an actor, you might want to incorporate unspoken guilt into the character. This unspoken guilt will add a contradictory layer to the unlawful character that will make them more three-dimensional and maybe even more relatable to an audience and more realistic. If you want to act realistically, you will inevitably have a bit of you in your portrayal of your character. To act realistically is to act like you would do in real life, and you can't do that and change your personality. For instance, maybe you're playing a detective who is investigating a murder and thinks they know who did it. And when you're interviewing your suspect, you might speak and act calmly and indifferently because you're playing a detective and it's their professional job and they have to be calm. But at the same time, you might be feeling hate or disgust towards your suspect because your character might suspect them and be disgusted by what they've done. These inner thoughts will reveal themselves in the eyes alone. And these inner thoughts will contrast with your outer exterior, or the facade that your character is putting on, the outward appearance that your character is giving. You may say something simply that could mean anything like, "And your name is?" But if you say this line thinking hate and disgust, then you're adding subtext to this line. It becomes less about asking someone's name and more about letting the audience know your character doesn't like this someone. "And your name is?" "And your name is?" "And your name is?" Likewise, if your character feels sorry for the murder suspect and doesn't think that they really did it, then they might ask the question with pity. "And your name is?" But the pity would be deep within their eyes. It's not like they would outwardly show it. You just have to have that thought there. Of course, this is a simple example of layering. Layering can get more complex. You can layer multiple feelings on top of one another and they can battle it out behind the eyes. People in real life are rarely open and honest, and so as actors, if we're to portray a character realistically, we have to think about all these contradicting layers that make a person human. There's often not always one inner feeling in a person. People are unsure about situations. They might like aspects of a scenario, dislike other aspects a split second later, feel ashamed about themselves, proud of themselves, think about what they've got to do when they leave the room they're in, think about where they've just come from. Maybe they're hungry and they're wondering what to have reality, people are rarely mindful and live in the moment. They're constantly judging their surroundings and other people and themselves. As such, inner thoughts and feelings are plentiful and they are often contradictory with themselves. And these contradictory thoughts and feelings contrast with the character's exterior facade, how they present themselves to others. There's always a discrepancy between a person's inner and outer. The outer changes in different circumstances, different contexts. And I suppose by association, the inner would change too. For instance, you present yourself one way in a job interview, and this would be different from how you might present yourself on a first date. Maybe. Well, you get the idea. Layering involves imbuing our character's dialogue or monologue with subtext. Subtext invariably adds depth to the portrayal of a character. This depth is about what you think, and it can be seen in the eyes. Now, this is where it gets more engaging because this layering of contrasts and subtext adds unpredictability to the character. We don't really know what they're thinking about a situation or what they're going to do next, even though we can speculate. Two-dimensional acting, where you just play the character as is and there's only one emotion there, they are confident, sad, whatever, is boring because we know what's going to happen next before the scene has finished. If a character is sad and you just play them sad, that's pretty much it. And it's not realistic because sad people usually don't act sad, they usually try and hide their sadness. If you want to be realistic about it. The sadness is only seen behind the eyes. It's the same with crying on cue. Like, people don't usually cry instantly unless it's like that one moment where they've let everything go. They'll usually hold back tears. Doesn't mean tears won't be there. But the goal isn't to cry, it's to not cry. Complex characters with contradictory or contrasting layers and subtext are way more entertaining to watch than actors who match thought with action and play everything sincerely. The second tip I've got for you is do the opposite, especially when it comes to intense emotions. I briefly touched on that a moment ago when I talked about crying. You don't cry. You aim not to cry. So, in moments of intense emotion, aspiring actors tend to wallow in it. They give themselves to the emotion they think they should portray, even though it's not realistic. By intense emotion, I mean anything where things get a bit more dramatic, such as anger, crying, shouting, laughing, elation, terror, heartbreak, big, intense emotions. In moments of such intense emotion, it's more realistic to play away from it. In other words, play the opposite. Doesn't necessarily have to be the exact opposite, but that's a great way to start. This playing of the opposite will also, or playing away from it at least, will also heighten the emotional intensity and make the scene more entertaining for the audience. For instance, if you want to play scared, you don't act scared, you act brave, because in real life when we're terrified we try not to be. If you think about it, if you've ever watched a horror film and there's a scary moment, you're like, no, but you don't want to just scream and wallow in the fear of it. You want to tell yourself it's okay, that at the moment will pass and you'll be laughing or something. So you don't play scared, you play brave in a scary situation. And this is the same in like horror films. The characters themselves are not playing scared unless there's that moment of utter terror and you're at a jump scare moment, and that's like when this is a brief moment of sincerity that's just come through and exploded from the emotions. That's different. That's a different thing. I'm talking about genuine, like, lingering terror. You play away from it. You tell yourself it's going to be okay even though you are scared. But nobody wallows in that feeling. It's a horrible feeling. Likewise, if you want to play a character who is laughing, you don't just laugh. You play, please don't laugh. Please don't laugh. I'm going to laugh. I'm going to laugh. Don't laugh. I don't want to laugh. I mean, there are moments when you can just burst out laughing. I mean, you get it when you see people like networking and all this stuff and they're like, ah, you're so funny. That looks false as f***, doesn't it? That's not realistic. I mean, it's realistic if you want to play that sort of character who's not genuinely laughing, but when you find something funny, it's like, I'm gonna laugh, you know? It heightens the intensity of the emotion anyway, and it's more entertaining to watch because you as the audience are like, oh, she's gonna laugh. Little dramas and little things. Likewise, if you want to play a character who is crying, don't just cry. I hear so many times people are like, I can't cry on cue. It's like, well, why would you even want to? Can you pretend to be sad? Crying is a byproduct of an intense emotion. It should be the byproduct and not the goal of that emotion. Sometimes people don't cry when they're intensely sad. That's okay if you can't cry on cue. That moment of unleashing that energy and emotion, that should be a moment. And yeah, get people crying, that's fine, but they're playing sad. People who just cry on cue without acting sad, Bad act, I mean, it looks fake. It looks like fake crying. But somebody who acts sad and doesn't really cry, if they look genuinely sad, you believe that they're sad, even if tears don't necessarily come straight away, because it doesn't always. Someone crying doesn't usually let it all out at once either. They hold back tears. Crying is a last resort, so you can have the odd tear as well and still be trying to hold it back. It's just much more entertaining and much more realistic to watch. You kind of feel for them more if you hold back the tears. There's more tension there and drama and electricity or something. Energy, whatever you want to call it. There's a tension between crying and not wanting to cry. Of course, this isn't to say that you don't laugh or cry when you're acting. Of course you do. You just have to think about these emotions a certain way if you want to appear realistic. Things like tears and laughter are expulsions of excess energy and should always be a byproduct, not the goal. They're just things that had to come out, you know? If you make these byproducts a goal, then the intense emotion that accompanies these byproducts is lost because it's simply not being accounted for. People rarely let their emotions show, especially when there are intense emotions involved. People hold back tears, act brave when they're terrified. When people are sad, they try to hide it. When people are drunk, they try to appear sober. The third point I've got for you today is react to changes. Now, often something new will happen in a scene. There will be a change. It could be a factual change or an emotive change. For instance, your character might learn something new about another character in the scene. Maybe another character enters the room, or maybe there is a shift in status between your character and another character. Such changes will affect the subtext in a scene, and it will affect the status of characters in a scene. And it will affect the body language of the characters. It will also affect your character's objectives and how they go about obtaining those objectives. For example, a character might learn something new about another character that could present an obstacle for them. Or maybe someone else enters the room and this helps your character obtain their objective for some reason. These are just examples. Subtext will also be affected when there is a change during a scene. For instance, saying, "Hello, nice to meet you," to a new acquaintance is going to sound extremely backloaded if your character realised moments before that this new acquaintance is having an affair with your character's significant other. Instead of, "Hello, nice to meet you," it would be, "Hello, nice to meet you." I don't know, you just got to have that thought in the eyes like, this is the person who's sleeping with my partner, what? This is just an example. Status can change if one character knows something that another character doesn't, and this can happen in a change during a scene. So if your character's learnt something and you meet that other person who's sleeping with your partner, you have the higher status the moment you know that, and they don't know that, you know. So there's a status shift, especially for the audience watching. We now see who has the upper hand, you know what I mean? The one knowing more usually has a higher status. In fact, I can't think of it being the other way around. Think about it. During a hostage scene, we've seen loads of these on TV, in dramas, on films, in films. The person held prisoner sees a policeman arriving outside. It's a cliched scene. But the captor doesn't see this. This scenario is overused in dramas and films, so no doubt you all know what I'm on about. You know what I'm on about. There's that noticeable shift or change in body language when the victim held captive suddenly has hope and knows they now have the upper hand because the police are here and they're going to maybe arrest the person keeping them prisoner against their will. The captor doesn't change because they don't know the police are outside, but relatively compared to the victim being held captive against their will, there is a visual shift in status, and we see it as an audience. We see the person held captive going, secretly smiling behind the eyes even though they're scared. As such, body language is affected by changes during a scene. Whether your character gains more status or a sudden dislike for another character, your body language is going to change. Changes during a scene might affect your character's objective and the way they go about obtaining that objective and the status or stakes in a scene. So when I'm talking about objective, I mean, what is your character's goal? Every character has an objective. They're there to do something. They might be there to network with someone. They might be there just to make a cup of tea. Maybe they go to make a cup of tea, there's a change, there's no sugar. Or there's no tea bags. Oh no, we can't make the tea. That's new information. Something different has happened. Body language changes. Maybe they're like... My point is, don't underestimate the small moments in a scene, such as another character walking into the room. This presents a change in the scene and can affect multiple characteristics. Body language, subtext, status. Someone entering the room will always be noteworthy, as it is in real life. Likewise, don't preempt a change in the scene. Don't start acting the changes before there is reason to. Remember, your character doesn't know what will happen next, even though you, the actor, does. Aspiring, starting out actors often forget to react to changes because, of course, they already know what's going to happen next in the scene. They'll either have their character reacting prematurely to something about to happen, or they might not realise there's been a change for the character, and they might not realise that things need to be approached differently. And this makes it look unrealistic. There's a lot to remember to incorporate when it comes to reacting to changes in a scene, so for now I'll summarise as follows. Listen, really listen. Listen to the other character that your character is reacting with. Be your character, stop observing yourself and listen to the other character and just react to them. Acting is more than talking as well. React when your character is not talking. This is just as important as acting when they are talking. Listen, show it in the eyes. You never leave that scene until the director goes, cut. That was a bit of a waffly point, but changes in a scene, react to them basically. Know your objective, not just your character's. Just because you're not acting realistically doesn't mean that you're bad at acting. The definition of realistic in art has changed over time anyway. In fact, the term realistic isn't even used when talking about this sort of stuff. People tend to use realism, which is also notoriously difficult to define. I'm only using the term realistically in this video because how to act realistically is a popular search term, and I'm hoping someone will click on this video and watch it till the end. You know, the famous theatre practitioner Bertolt Brecht claimed that his theatrical style, filled with contradictions and alienation and contrasting gestures, was better at portraying the reality of the 20th century than other naturalist forms of art because it offered a variety of perspectives at once that forced the people watching to think about what they were watching rather than get absorbed amidst the story and forget about their life and find cathartic release and forget they were watching a play. So I think there's a difference between playing something realistically and playing something sincerely. For instance, you can play something sincerely where you believe the character exists in that scene, in that moment, but it's not realistic. Got an example.
My partner left me last night on the phone. What kind of couples therapist am I if I can't hold down my own relationship?
None of this is realistic, but the character is sincere enough. It's because she's so sincere, she seems unrealistic. There are no contradictions there, no subtext. She's bearing all at that one moment. We believe her, but we don't believe she's real. I don't anyway. Likewise, you can play something realistically, but the character is insincere. You know they're lying, they contradict themselves, they're difficult to pin down. But this is how people behave in real life, and it appears realistic. Even though, despite such an accurate representation, the actor is acting, and the whole thing isn't real anyway. You have to know what it is you want to do in your performance. If it's to appear real and like you're not acting at all, then you have to know how people act in real life. Observe them. Observe yourself. New actors always do something unrealistic, something that is not normal. But some of them do it sincerely, which isn't bad acting, it's just not realistic acting. If you want to act like you would in real life, then get to know how you are in real life. Dee Cannon, in In-Depth Acting, writes, if you do want to be an actor who shows great depth in your characters, then I can't stress enough how crucial it is to find the emotional depth within yourself. The richer you become as a person, the richer you will be and grow as an actor. I think this is crucial if you want to act realistically, or rather, appear like you're not acting at all.